Hi everyone, welcome back to No Comment Podcast and episode 4 of the Watts Family Murders series. In the previous episode, we looked into the disastrous week the Watts spent in North Carolina when Chris flew out to spend quality time with his family. Yeah, that didn't work out too well. Chris was a complete a-hole the entire week and made Shanann and I'm sure his girls feel pretty fucking awful with his whole I'm not into my life anymore vibe he had going on. What an absolute dick. Today we are nearing the end of our timeline as we take a look at the final days before August 13th. So let's jump straight in. August 8th. Chris returns to work at Anadarko following his vacay in North Carolina. As soon as he arrives, he approaches Luke Epple, who's his superior at work, to tell him that he and Shanann are having marital issues, and if he has noticed anything weird on his work truck GPS, as this was monitored by the company, it's because he's most probably going to be staying at a friend's house. So potentially he's sowing a seed here for when or if he needed to take his work truck off its usual route in the coming days. Of course, we all know now that he disposed of the bodies at one of the oil sites that he would frequent in his work truck, and so that wouldn't be suspect on the GPS. Really the least of his worries considering how unbelievably bad he was at hiding a murder, but more on that later. But what if he was planning to take them somewhere else, but ran out of time because Shanann arrived home late as her flight from Arizona was delayed following her work trip? So that's definitely something to think about. Shanann receives a text from her friend Sarah Nudd asking whether things have got any better with the whole Chris being a distant and shitty husband thing. Shanann responds, no, and that it's still really bad. She tells Sarah that Chris doesn't want this baby and he's happy with just Cece and Bella. Shanann goes on to say that she tried to instigate sex with him when they arrived home from North Carolina, but he rejected her, so his allegiance with NK is still burning strong. Following yet another rejection from her cold-ass husband, pregnant Shanann leaves the room to sleep on the couch, but can't due to the fact her marriage is in ruins and cries for about an hour. And what is Chris doing during this time, you ask? He's sleeping. I'm sure Shanann was expecting Chris to come out to the lounge area to see if she was okay, but unfortunately he now couldn't give two craps about his family or his present life and instead falls into a sweet slumber. Shanann decides, fuck this, I'm not sleeping on this damn couch, and kicks him out of bed. Yeah, right, get his sorry ass out of that bed. He can sleep on the couch, or the basement, or the street, wherever. Shanann tells Sarah that they have an ultrasound tonight to find out the gender of the baby, which should be a really exciting time for a couple. But, you know, Chris shits all over that with his negative demeanour and horribleness, and instead Shanann is talking with her friend about how he would abort this baby if she agreed. So it's just so horrible. Elsewhere, Chris receives a text from his buddy Josh Rosenberg to query if today is the day they go for the ultrasound. Chris responds, yep, today's the day. I'm excited. Yeah, right. After Chris finishes work, he rushes off to NK's pad for their emotional reunion after his week out of state. They have sex probably a million times before he flies out again to get home in time for the ultrasound. Phew. I guess the fry stuff really does give you energy because I'm exhausted just thinking about his schedule. When he arrives home, Nicole Atkinson is already there to look after Cece and Bella whilst Chris and Shanann go to the ultrasound. Nicole Atkinson describes Chris as being pretty cold and off, saying that he didn't even acknowledge her. Rude. At the ultrasound, Shanann tries to reach for Chris's hand to share this tender and memorable moment with him, but the complete SOB clams up and refuses to even look at her. My God, you are a piece of shit. I don't hate much in this world, but I despise this man with every fibre of my being. So, simultaneous to Shanann and Chris attending the hospital, NK, aka Queen of Looking Shit Up on the internet, Googles marrying your mistress. So it seems like there were some pretty serious conversations going on between them two when Chris was at her apartment earlier that evening. Not that she'll ever admit that. When they return home, Shanann passes Nicole the sealed envelope with the baby's gender inside. The plan was for Nicole and another of Shanann's friends, Taylor, to throw Shanann and Chris a gender reveal party the following week. However, later that evening, Shanann texts Nicole to say cancel the gender reveal party following another argument with Chris, during which she tells her he doesn't think they're compatible anymore. Chris, you're not like 18 years old and this isn't your third date. Who the hell talks like that? Shanann tells Nicole she doesn't want to put her friends through having to stomach a joyous occasion with this sad sack, and asks what she's having as she needs some good news. Nicole doesn't want to reveal the gender over text, so she says she'll drive over. It's pretty late by this point, and so Shanann says it's fine and she can let her know tomorrow morning. The next morning, Nicole pops over to Walmart before going to the Wattses to grab gender reveal goodies such as champagne poppers to try and make the gender reveal special for Shanann and Chris, now that the party has been cancelled. We'll get more into about how Nicole is like the best friend you could possibly hope for in the next episode, but just to sing her praises here, this woman is so thoughtful and kind. We all need a Nicole in our lives, but not NK. No one needs that. At the same time, Shanann is texting with one of her other friends about the situation with Chris. Shanann talks about fighting for full custody of the kids, but also voices her concerns about how she's going to afford to live in Colorado with 3 kids and that the house is in Chris's name. August 9th, Shanann texts Chris to ask if he wants to find out the baby's gender together tonight. Chris replies yes, and Shanann sends a heart emoji in response. So there's not much more about this that I can find, and so I assume that they did do the gender reveal that evening together and found out that Shanann was pregnant with a baby boy. August 9th also represents the day that Chris decides to send Shanann a weird-ass photo of a life-size doll covered in a white sheet. So I'm sure loads of you have already seen this picture. It's pretty infamous and synonymous with this case, but I will share it on my Instagram highlights for this episode. Chris tells Shanann that Bella positioned her doll like this and placed a sheet over the top, which when you see the photo looks a lot like how a corpse is covered with a white sheet. Shanann posts the picture to Facebook with the caption, "I don't know what to think about this," with 2 laughing face emojis. So there's been a lot of discussion about this photo. As I said, it's really big in this case. Some people are saying maybe it was a premonition, which is just so eerie and haunting. There's literally no words to describe how awful that is. But potentially it could be. Some say that maybe Bella overheard Chris talking about his plan to murder the family and was sort of playing it out, which again is just too disturbing for words. And in my opinion, I think it's quite unlikely. In my view, I don't think Bella did this at all. I think Chris covered the doll in the sheet and sent it to Shanann, who he knew would most likely post it to Facebook. Why would he do this? Well, to bolster his case, should he need it, that Shanann killed the girls. During his initial confession with detectives, Ronnie, Chris's father, brings up the photo to Agent Tammy Lee and Graham shortly after Chris admits to murdering Shanann but pins the girls' murders on her. Ronnie is desperately searching his phone to find the photo on Facebook to show the detectives, as he believes that this shows Shanann was unhinged and is evidence that she could do something horrible to her girls. Chris, literally sitting next to him the whole time, says absolutely nothing about him initially sending the photograph to Shanann. He just sits there quietly crying and generally feeling quite sorry for himself. This is my view on this photo. Of course, Bella could have just been playing and Chris shared it with Shanann. The thing that's strange is that Chris hardly ever spoke with Shanann over text by now, not less share photos of what the girls were up to without her having to ask him to do so in the first place. Whatever the truth, it's definitely freaky as hell. So do let me know your thoughts on this one, guys. Moving on. What else happens on August 9th? Chris deletes his Facebook page. Yet another red siren alarm for Shanann to suspect that Chris is having an affair. Nothing screams cheating scumbag more than deleting your social media accounts. She quizzes him on it over text, but he doesn't respond. I can't see that this is brought up again. Maybe they chatted about it and he spun some kind of lie to cover his ass, but I'm guessing she probably didn't want to rock the boat with him any more than she had to, given the current state of their relationship. Chris tells investigators later that he deleted his account because NK had said she'd told her friend Charlotte about their relationship, and he thought Charlotte might look him up on Facebook and find out Shanann was pregnant. He wasn't worried about NK finding out before because she didn't have a Facebook account, having deleted it prior to their meeting. Don't worry about NK, Chris. She's been clued up on the situation the whole time. Shanann, speaking with friends, tells a select few that she's expecting a baby boy and they plan to call him Nico Lee Watts. She asks them to keep it a secret as Chris doesn't want to announce the gender or name until Monday, August 13th. Oh my fucking god, this is yet another sickening cog in this gruesome machine. Chris tells Shanann not to tell anyone until Monday as he knows full well that ain't gonna happen as she won't be around anymore on account of his plan to murder her. Fuck, I hate this guy. At this stage, Chris seems to be playing slightly nicer with Shanann before she leaves for Arizona. In text with Cassie and Addie, she says that he's kinda being Chris again, although he's still cold. She tells them he even gave her a kiss, which is the second time he had done so since picking him up from the airport in North Carolina, which is absolutely mental. No, I don't think Chris had a sudden attack of conscience and realised the error in his ways, but more likely the case that Shanann may have said something about not going to the Lavelle trip in Arizona and staying to work on their marriage. So he's playing all nice to make sure she goes and his plan of action isn't derailed. Also, he has a date night plan with NK on Saturday when Shanann is away, and God forbid anything gets in the way of that. Shanann also orders Chris a book called Hold Me Tight, 7 Conversations for a Lifetime of Love from Amazon, which is due to arrive when she's away. She also writes him a letter expressing her feelings of love and admiration for him, which I'll again post to the Insta story for this episode. Bless this woman, she is literally moving mountains to try and get things back on track. Unfortunately, it's wasted on this piece of shit. August 10th, Nicole Atkinson picks up Shanann from her house at 4:30 a.m, God that's early, to go to the airport for their flight to Scottsdale, Arizona for the Lavelle training. On the flight, Shanann downloads an audio version of the book she ordered Chris and listens to it with Nicole. Arriving in Scottsdale, Shanann was totally wiped from everything that had been happening and what she was going through with Chris. Her friends later told detectives that she was a complete wreck and looked exhausted, not her usual radiant self. Shortly after arriving, Shanann messages their realtor, Ann Meadows, to say they were thinking of selling the house and downsizing somewhere in Brighton and would like to explore their options. Back in Colorado, Chris texts his friend Jeremy Lindstrom to see whether his daughter McKenna was available the following night to watch the girls for a few hours, as he had won a raffle at work for a Rockies game. Lies upon lies with this guy. Jeremy responds to say she is, and they arrange a time for her to come over to watch Bella and Cece whilst Chris goes to the game. Shanann receives an Amazon confirmation that her order, the Hold Me Tight book, has been delivered and texts Chris to tell him to check the post. Later during the search of their house, this book, still inside the Amazon package, was found in the trash, not even the recycling people, where I expect he tossed it the moment he fetched the package from the mailbox. At around 3 p.m. that day, Chris pulled into a Safeway car park to meet his colleague Troy McCoy, fantastic name, as they had arranged for Troy to show Chris how to use his new Amazon Fire Stick. I've listened to Troy's interview and the guy is great. Very precise and methodical in his account. He also sounds exactly like Eugene Porter from The Walking Dead, just as a side note. So when I listen to his interview, I always picture Eugene in my head. During this meeting, Troy receives another call from a co-worker, Cody Roberts, to say there was a leak at one of Anadarko's oil sites, Survey 319, and that someone would need to go and fix this first thing on Monday morning. Hearing their conversation as Troy took the call via his Bluetooth hands-free set in his car, so Chris could hear everything that they were talking about, he puts himself forward to go to the site and check the leak. So the big question here is, why was Chris so keen to head out to Survey first thing? Particularly because he had previously told Shanann that he would be around to come with her to take Bella for her first day back at school after being away for the summer in North Carolina. So what are my thoughts on this? I think an opportunity presented itself and he jumped on it and grabbed it with both hands. I think he had a rough plan of how the murders and getting rid of the bodies would play out, but this leak presented a golden opportunity for him to be out at a site in his work van early Monday morning without arousing suspicion. Well, in his simple mind it did anyway. Later that night, Shanann Googles Groupon deals for a weekend getaway in Aspen for her and Chris, whilst around the same time, he's looking for date locations for his night with NK tomorrow. Literally the Twilight Zone. August 11th. Early that morning, Chris gets a text from Jeremy asking whether he'd rather go with him to the Broncos game that night and skip the Rockies. Chris, continuing to weave his web of lies and deceit, says he feels obligated to go to the Rockies game because it's work and if he skips it, there might be questions. Chris later reflects on this during his second confession with law enforcement after he was convicted, that this was God's way of sending him a message to change his course, but he failed to take heed of this warning. morning and instead continued down his path of destruction. So we haven't really heard much of NK so far in this episode, but don't you worry guys, I've got a humdinger here for you. In preparation for her date night with Chris, NK spends 45 minutes Googling the following topics. And I should also add, this was at 9:30 a.m. in the morning. How to prepare for anal sex and the anal sex guide. She then searches Pornhub for interracial porn videos and threesomes with double penetration. NK, I formally appoint the queen of looking shit up on the internet. I mean, you can't knock the girl for her sheer commitment to preparation. No surprises here, thank you. It's also worth mentioning that there's a side note in the discovery documents from the detective undertaking the search to say this is by no means the only time that she sought out pornographic videos via the internet, which is just brilliant. But this is the only one that's referenced in discovery, maybe because of the timing or maybe just to provide a small amount of exposure on NK and her personality. But the fact that there is confirmation of other searches but no specific detail does make me question what else has been purposefully left out of the discovery documents. Back in Scottsdale, Shanann's friends were growing increasingly worried about her. She wasn't eating much at all and Nicole had to keep reminding her to drink water. They later commented that the majority of the trip she spent in her room listening to her copy of the Hold Me Tight book that she ordered Chris. The babysitter McKenna arrives at the Watts' house just before 5 p.m. and Chris leaves for the Rockies game. Sorry, scratch that, NK's house. After he arrives, they obviously have sex of some description, wink wink, then head out for a dinner at the Lazy Dog, which is a bar and grill type place, I think. Apparently the menu at the first Lazy Dog they arrive at is no good for NK's superfood dietary needs, so they head out to another nearby Lazy Dog, which she deems satisfactory. But would the menu have been that different at the other Lazy Dog, considering it's the same chain? I don't know. It also strikes me as a bit weird that for someone who prides himself for being in tip-top shape and maintaining a very healthy diet, a chain bar and grill would be the venue of choice for dinner. But there you go. So they sit down for dinner and order the salmon. Stop. Who orders a fucking salmon at a bar and grill place? This makes no sense. Over dinner, they discuss Chris's options now that the separation is moving forward, and NK talks about 2-bedroom apartments he can rent and that he should make sure he's near to his ex-wife because that's really, really important to her. NK recalls in a later interview with FBI that he seemed less enthusiastic about the plan to relocate and kept making excuses about money being tight. After dinner, they get the bill and Chris pays for it from his and Shanann's joint account, having apparently run out of his endless supply of Anadarko gift cards that he would usually use. During his second confession interview, Tammy Lee asked why he used this card, as Shanann would have been notified of the charge and would have been immediately suspicious, which is exactly what happened. Agent Tammy Lee also queried whether he just stopped caring by that point or whether he wanted to get caught. Chris responds that he had nothing else to pay with and that he had considering asking NK to pay, which he says really sheepishly as if he's completely ashamed of having to consider asking her to pay. It's 2018, man. Women can pay for shit too. Also, NK being the independent woman she keenly portrays herself at any given opportunity, would have, I'm sure, loved to have paid. Or maybe she's not as chilled out and progressive as she's trying to make out. So, of course, Shanann gets a ping that their joint card has been used and immediately checks the online banking to find Chris spent $68 on dinner. At around 10 p.m, she checks with McKenna to see whether Chris has arrived home, but he hasn't, even though the Lazy Dog restaurant is around 15 minutes from their house. Shanann calls Chris and asks what he had for dinner, and he tells her a salmon and a beer. Shanann immediately Googles the Lazy Dog menu and can see for herself that something ain't adding up here. She turns to Nicole and says, salmon and a beer? That's like $30. Sorry for the accent, guys. It's just terrible. Nicole tries to reassure her that maybe he paid for a friend's dinner, but this was the last straw for Shanann, who must have been certain now that her husband was a dirty, rotten cheater. But for Shanann, keeping up appearances was important for now at least, and so she dropped the issue and just texted Chris to ask him to keep the receipt so they can write it off when it came to doing their taxes. August 12th, the day before the murders. In Arizona, Shanann spends the morning reflecting to Addie about her marriage and her part to play in the breakdown it was currently facing. I'll upload a few of these messages to the Instagram highlight for this episode because when I was reading these, I can really relate to her in a lot of ways and how she describes her character. She talks about being a control freak and that Chris isn't allowed to even hang a picture on the wall without her overseeing it, which I'm sorry to say, but also rings true for me. I'm very controlling around the house and like things done in a certain way, and I know it can drive my husband completely crazy. But not into the arms of another woman and not into a crazed murderer, because these are little things, nuances that can be worked out with communication. But unfortunately, Chris's personality was to just go with the flow, as Shanann describes. Shanann goes on to say she may belittle him without realizing it, and that her weakness is her Italian temper that she can't hold back when she's pissed. I mean, yeah, these all sound like fair points that Shanann could have worked on given the chance, and they're not at all uncommon. As I said, these messages with Addie really resonate with me, and I can see a lot of my own personality traits here. In one message, Shanann says that Chris is a submissive, and Addie responds to say that that's just his disposition and that he would kill for you. I just can't. There's so many freaky ass references looking back at this case with hindsight. At around 10:30 a.m, Shanann asks Chris to send her photos of the girls because she's missing them. He sends her a photo of Bella and Cece sat at the table eating a snack. This was the last known image taken of Cece in her life. At around midday, Chris leaves for Jeremy's house with the girls for his son's 4th birthday party. During the party, Jeremy's wife Jennifer was speaking with Chris about their baby and asked whether they needed a crib. Chris responds to say no, as they have that sorted. So I'm not sure whether they still had Cece's crib or that they purchased one already, or that he's just a calculating psychopath who, whilst having this conversation, knew in his head he wouldn't need a crib because he would be killing his wife in the next 12 hours or so. And unfortunately, my gut tells me it's the latter. Chris arrives home with the girls around 4 p.m. and they FaceTime Shanann's parents. During the conversation, they tell them how excited they are for mummy to come home and that she'll be there when they wake up. My heart is literally broken. Back at her pad, NK speaks with her friend Charlotte more about her relationship with Chris. The texts are pretty telling, and so I'll post them to the Instagram highlight. But just to give you a flavour, she tells her friend, "I think he really likes me. It's the best sex I've ever had. I'm hooked." So we'll circle back to these messages when we look in more detail of NK's account to law enforcement about her relationship with Chris, as she constantly tries to play it down at her end, painting the image that it was like a 5-week fling. Well, that doesn't seem to be the case here. She goes on to tell Charlotte that he has kids and has been there and done that, and that she doesn't want to be second all the time. So during her later interviews with FBI, she tells them very emphatically that she never, ever told him that the kids were a problem. Like, she says never a million times. But I find it very hard to believe, given she's mentioned it to her friends, so it's clearly an issue for her, that she never mentioned it to Chris and they never had a conversation about it. And that's not to say the conversation was, "I can't stand that you have children, you have to kill them, please." But maybe something like, "I don't want to be second to your children, I want to be first." I strongly suspect these discussions did take place. At home, Chris texts Cody Roberts to remind him that he'll go out to Survey 319 in the morning to check the apparent leak and repair if needed. He says to Cody, "No sense in both of us going there, lol." Shanann texts Chris for an update on the girls just before 8 p.m. and asks for pictures. He resends the earlier photos. Yeah, she probably wanted to see other photos, of the girls having a nice time at the birthday party. He does manage to send her a new photo of Bella sitting down at the party, and this is the last known photograph of Bella in her life. Shanann tells Chris that there's a really bad dust storm in Arizona, which caused the power to go out in the restaurant her and her friends were in for dinner. She goes on to say that she hopes her flight isn't cancelled because her friend Addie's flight has been. As we sadly know, her flight wasn't cancelled, but it was delayed. If it had been cancelled, then who knows? Perhaps things could have gone very differently. Unfortunately, we can't change the past and the future hasn't happened yet, so the present is all we can work on. During this time, Shanann and Chris are texting a little back and forth. Shanann is being really sweet to Chris, thanking him for taking care of the kids so she can work. They're his kids too. I doubt he's ever thanked you for looking after the kids and working at the same time so he can go out for work. She asks Chris what veggies he wants for dinner tomorrow night, to which he responds, green beans. So Totally normal conversations going on here. Nothing seems awry. In fact, Chris seems to be the most responsive he's been with Shanann in like the past 6 weeks. But underneath this facade of normalcy is a darkness that is brewing inside of Chris Watts. And this darkness is getting dangerously close to the surface with each passing minute. At around 9:45, Shanann tries to call Chris to update him on her flight, but she's unable to get through. He'll later text her at around 11:20 p.m. to say that he fell asleep, but we know from his phone records that he was actually engaged in a 111-minute call with Miss NK hours before the murders. The content of this call is clearly of vital importance, but conveniently, when later questioned about it, both Chris and NK get a case of selective amnesia and cannot remember a thing they discussed. NK completely plays it down in her interview, saying, "We spoke about a lot of stuff. I can't remember everything we spoke about." And Chris tells investigators that they were having phone sex. Yeah, right. I do not for a second believe that neither of them remember what they spoke about that night for 111 minutes, and the fact that they are both so shady about it and can't give a single detail other than it was phone sex, which I don't believe either. This makes me extremely suspicious of what was said. We will circle back to this later in the coming episodes when I talk more in depth about theories of what actually took place that night, but it is very suspect. Shanann finally boarded her flight back to Denver airport just after 10 p.m. At 1:48 a.m. on the 13th of August 2018, the Watts' doorbell cam logged Shanann approaching 2825 Saratoga Trail with her suitcase, opening the front door and entering. This was the last time Shanann was seen alive. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for today, guys. The next 2 episodes are going to be an in-depth look, firstly at the 13th of August and the days following until Chris's first confession. Then, to wrap up this series, the final episode will focus on pulling all the information we have available from different sources to try and piece together what exactly took place that night and if Chris acted alone. Thanks for listening, guys. If you like this podcast, please do follow me on Instagram or Twitter at NoCommentPod, where I'll be posting the highlights relevant to this episode and other bits related to the cases I cover. I also have a Patreon page, which I'll link in the description. As you know, I do this pod all on my lonesome, so any help would be greatly appreciated and will go towards making the content that much better. I am in the process, promise I am, of creating some exclusive bits for Patreon users, so stay tuned for that. As I said in the last episode, I'm thinking of doing a sort of commentary over the Chris Watts and NK police interviews, and so let me know if this will be something of interest and I will get started on that, I promise. Okay, until next time.